Now, following the daring drone attack on its Black Sea fleet, Russia has now suspended its participation in the United Nations brokered grain deal, and this has reversed months of diplomatic efforts that were aimed at ensuring food security in the world's poorest regions. Now, Ukraine is one of the world's biggest exporters of food grains. In 2020, Ukraine alone accounted for nearly about 9% of the wheat exports, 15% of the global maize exports, and 44% of all sunflower oil in the international market. Many countries of the world, including those of global north and south, were heavily reliant on Ukraine for the food grain imports. However, when Russia invaded the Ukrainian territories in February, these crucial exports were affected. Russia captured and also blocked crucial ports on the Black Sea, and with that, it halted the essential food grain supplies from being exported out of Ukraine. And this led to the price of food grains soaring across the world. In the month of May this year, the United Nations World Food Programme said that nearly about 47 million people were at the risk of acute hunger due to the global food crisis. The Ukraine grain deal, officially known as the Black Sea Grain Initiative, was brokered by Turkey and the United Nations in the month of July. It eased Russia's naval blockade and also led to the reopening of the three key Ukrainian ports. And since then, nearly about 400 ships carrying a total of 9 million metric tons have departed Ukraine's ports. The initiative also helped stabilize and subsequently lower the global food prices, essentially moving precious grain from one of the world's bread baskets to the tables of those in need. At least about 40 countries received Ukrainian foodstuff from this initiative. Nearly 25% of the food that was exported, that was equivalent to 1.8 million metric tons of the food grain, went to the low and the lower middle income countries with vulnerable populations. Some 25% of the food grain went to the upper middle income nations, and the rest went to the high income nations. Also, two-thirds of the wheat that was exported under this initiative reportedly was exported to countries in Latin America, Asia, Africa and Oceania. The deal, initially brokered for 120 days, was due to be renewed in November, on the 19th of November. But with Russia now suspending this deal, grain prices are expected to rise pretty dramatically. The experts say that the suspension of this grain deal has once again raised fears of a global food crisis. And reacting to the development, the United States has said that Moscow is weaponizing food. The American President Joe Biden has said that Russia's move is simply outrageous. The United Nations, for its part, has also urged all parties to ensure the continuation of the grain deal, calling it a critical humanitarian effort. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked for a strong international response to Russia's move, particularly from the leaders of G20, which is gathering in a couple of weeks in Indonesia. All right, now to give us more insights in terms of what is likely to happen next in the battlefields of Ukraine, we're being joined in by Mr. Alexei Melnik, who is the co-director of Foreign Relations and also International Security Program at the Razumkov Center in Kiev. Now, Mr. Melnik, thank you very much indeed for taking time out and speaking to us here on WION. Now, what we've witnessed in the course of the last 36 hours is a serious escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war, where Sevastopol has in fact come under attack. This, of course, is the headquarters of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And because of this, the Russians say that they are now suspending the United Nations brokered grain deal. How do you think, let me first ask you this question, how do you think this is now likely to affect the export of grains out of Ukraine?
Good evening. This is a very good question, that for combination of questions that we are discussing, Russian military failures on the battlefield, and at the same time Russia's actions to compensate somehow its lack of any progress on the battlefield in Ukraine. And I think that the United Nations is absolutely right by saying that Russia is trying to weaponize grain issue, or trying to create as many problems and as possible, not just for Ukraine, for the entire world. And of course, on the eve of the next G20 summit, that's probably one of the issues that Russia can bring into the agenda and force the other leaders to finally meet Putin and try to discuss something with President Putin, who's been isolated heavily for the last probably more than 6 months.
All right. Now, and also Russia has made some serious allegations. It has said that on the basis of the wreckage of these unmanned surface vessels that were used to target the Russian ships at Sevastopol, it has said that these unmanned surface vessels were using navigation modules that were manufactured or designed at least in Canada. Along with this, Russia has also said that the British Navy is directly involved in both the planning and also in the execution of the sabotage of the Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This is what Russia has accused in the last 36 hours. You know, this war had so far been Russia against Ukraine, but now do you think that instead of just it being a proxy war of Russia against NATO, this is a war that could now escalate from this moment onwards?
That's what Russia is trying to, first of all, to present to its own public, that lack of success in Ukraine is not because of the strengths of the Ukrainian army or the skills of the Ukrainian force commander, but this is just because Russia is fighting against the whole West, against NATO, and I don't see anything surprising that current sophisticated weapons have components made in different countries. Even if you look at the Russian equipment, they have components made in the West. So that's just an attempt to explain why Russian forces are performing so badly. But again, talking about the possible escalations, Russia probably running out of its resources, and that's why Russia is trying to use energy, to use spraying, and all these kind of things to escalate in order to force Ukraine, to force international partners, to force other vulnerable countries like in the Middle East, in Africa, to support Russian position and to influence Ukrainian political elite to some heavy and uncomfortable compromises in the possible negotiations with Russia.
All right, very interesting. Now, lastly, before we let you go, Mr. Melnik, now some people are saying that this attack that was staged on Sevastopol is more a decoy for a counteroffensive that Ukraine wants to carry out to try and capture Kherson. Is that how you see this?
Yeah, definitely. There are very good perspectives for Ukrainian forces to liberate Kherson in a matter of a few weeks. And also many Russian male bloggers admit that Russia actually has no means to defend these temporary occupied areas. And one of the objectives that Russian leadership is trying to push is to distract internal public attention from the next failures. And the last attack on the Black Sea fleet has been not just harmful, but very humiliating for the Russian armed forces, because as we all know, that Russian military command reported months ago that Russia destroyed the whole Ukrainian military capability. And in fact, Ukraine has very limited maritime force. And even without maritime force, you say Ukraine is still able to fight against the so-called the second best army in the world.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Alexei Melnik, for joining us and getting us all those insights there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.